I heard the growl in the distance. He didn't. I held up my right fist next to my head, giving the signal to stop. His eyes widened and the growling grew louder. The screaming started from the front of the column. There were 7 zombies at the front of the road, having no rifle and little combat training. Several of the men at the front seemed like they wanted to break formation and run. The woodline was to our right. Spaghetti made a break for the supposed safety of the trees. There were 20 zombies waiting for him. Several other men looked to the direction where he ran. They were on the edge. They didn't know if they should follow him or not. These were not men who fought in the war. They grew up in a hard world, living in the rubble of the old. But they did not know the herds. They didn't know what the right thing to do was. Spaghetti got into the tree line and found himself surrounded. His fat, flabby arms unable to push off the zombies. Spaghetti was pulled down only by one zombie. Begging for his life, he screamed out to God as the undead creature bit into his shoulder. "Oh God, please, not like this, Lord." His screams turned into gurgles after that, as 5 of the undead joined in on what was certainly a feast for the ages. No one followed Spaghetti into the woodline. After that, I looked behind me. There were 7 zombies on the road, attacking the rear of the column in reflection of the front. I looked at the zombies in the woods, almost 20 in a line, gnarling in undead hunger that their meal was gone. Only a few feet away, but not advancing. Hungry, but not moving forward. They were connected to each other and the trees themselves. "Sir, look!" I yelled, pointing at the zombies. "They're chained up!" "Son of a bitch!" "They put them there so we wouldn't run off," the LT said with horror and disgust in his face. The open field to the left of the road had a line of 20 zombies, all chained together, coming toward the ruck march. They'd be on us in a few minutes. We were being boxed in. The LT squared his shoulders, cracked his neck, and spoke with a clear sense of authority, saying, "Take charge at the back, I'll get the front. You maintain a defensive posture. Tell them to drop their rucksacks and get their e-tools out. That's what they'll fight with. Make sure they keep their IBAs on, that'll save their lives. You keep this simple. Once you can break away from the back, we'll meet you in the front. That's where the breakout happens." "Don't die," the LT said, dropping his pack to grab his e-tool. Moments later, he was at the front of the column. As I got to the back of the formation that was seconds away from falling apart, I dropped my rucksack and took my e-tool out, unfolding it. The handle was rusty, and the jagged left side of the spade worn smooth from decades of service, but it would have to do. "Everybody pair up! Drop your rucksacks and get your e-tools out," I shouted, as the zombies were only a few minutes away. "I need 4 bodies at the rear with me. Don't worry about the woodline, they aren't going anywhere. Ramirez, on me!" Within seconds, Ramirez ran up to my right, as I faced zombies approaching to the rear of the column. "Yes, Sergeant," he asked, e-tool in hand. I could hear the LT barking orders at the front of the column. Lots of shouting, but no screaming yet. Maybe we could do this. "You make sure the guys at our right flank are in pairs. We hold the line. After we deal with the enemy in the rear, we fight our way to the front, link up with the LT, and get the fuck out of here." "Roger," Ramirez said, running to the line of soldiers facing the field. I honestly didn't know enough to tell if the plan was good or not. But you know what? An iffy plan was better than sheer panic any day of the week. I was loud and angry and terrifying all at once. I hated the army for putting us through this stupid school. There were 5 of us fighting in the rear. Charles, Rockwell, Goodspeed, Fitz, and myself. I stood in the center, shoving my e-tool up the jawline and into the neck of the first zombie in front of me. It wasn't a clean decapitation, so I kicked the monster to the ground and turned to Fitz. The short, black zombie in tattered pants with no shirt pawed after him, grabbing around his shoulders to bring Fitz in close, and with a gleeful smile, Fitz shoved his e-tool under the zombie's jaw, and a sickening squelch sound erupted as the shovel slid through the underside of the head and into the brain, causing the zombie to cease its undead existence. Behind Fitz, I saw Charles on the ground, screaming in pain as 2 zombies were biting into his neck. Rockwell and Goodspeed attacked the enemy creatures on Charles, ripping them off his neck and stomping their heads into a mush. It took several seconds to neutralize the zombies, seconds Rockwell and Goodspeed didn't have. 2 zombies grabbed Rockwell from behind and dragged him to the ground. He screamed as they tore into his neck, lying on the ground and trying to push them off as they dug deeper into his flesh. Goodspeed pivoted to help him, but couldn't as the reanimated corpse of Fitz crawled its way over and bit into his leg. I looked to where the LT was. The formation was split into 2 groups, each completely surrounded. There were 2 zombies facing him, but he was holding his own. A soldier at either side. They were fighting them to a standstill in a spear formation like the Greeks of old. Push back, then thrust with the E-tool. It was a solid tactic. And then I drew the short straw. Being 5'7", I was used to that. A 6'7" pale zombie came for me, his enormous hands grabbing at my neck as his vocal cords attempted to make noises. It was a dark giggle, a growling glee that showed more personality than most zombies. I kicked his abdomen as hard as I could, trying to keep some space between us. Ramirez ran around and kicked behind his kneecaps, knocking him to the ground. The 6'7" zombie struggled with the concept of being face first on the ground, so I utilized that time by driving the pointing tip of my E-tool in the right side of his temple, destroying the brain. I turned to Ramirez and saw him on the ground being eaten by Fitz and Goodspeed. His eyes were wide open, screaming with all the sadness of a young man who lived a hard life and died a terrible death. His arms were doing their best to fight back, to push through the pain and continue that struggle that was life a little bit longer, but his desperate moans of resistance grew dimmer as he began to gurgle, and blood was seeping into his throat. He shook, his muscles contracting to the trauma of being ripped apart by teeth. There would be no happy ending for Ramirez. That was the last thing he showed me with his eyes. And before they could notice me, I ran to the 2 zombies feasting on the boy. I knocked Fitz down and shoved my E-tool in the right side of his temple. Goodspeed looked up from his meal and snarled. But then I saw hope. It was almost hypnotic. The LT leading the charge. 20 men in a diamond formation, moving as a unit. No man fighting alone, each kicking the zombie back, then thrusting up the jaw with an E-tool. The men at the back of the formation performing a fighting retreat, pushing the zombies back and killing them as they moved backwards to keep pace with the formation. The zombie Goodspeed leapt at the LT. He kicked Goodspeed down and thrust his E-tool on the left side of the head, destroying the brain. And soon the rest of the survivors joined the ranks, 43 men in total, and fought their way to victory.
Holy shit. We killed 7.
This isn't training. We're not preparing these poor bastards for anything. We're just mindlessly following the rantings of a senile old fuck. We're sending emaciated, terrified children to their death for nothing. For nothing. This is just so he can get his next star.
We've done as much as we can, though, to keep him alive.
It's not enough. We're not saving enough. We have to do something.
I keep trying to push him towards the chaplain, and it seems to be working.
We have to end it. We can't allow this to continue. What we're doing isn't working. We're not convincing these kids to back out or run away. They think we're spurring them on to some victory, that we're trying to reverse psychology them into participating. I can't. I'm gonna go public. I'm gonna leave you out of it. You've got a wife and kids. I can't pull you down too.
Well, pin it on you. General Finkster will say it's your fault, and he'll get off completely.
Fuck it. It doesn't matter anymore. We'll see what Congress has to say. And we'll let it go from there. It's in God's hands now, if he chooses to show up.
The response from Congress was one of outrage as usual. Loud gestures were punctuated by heightened sympathies for the victims, coupled with gratitude for the service of the fallen, all boiled down to being the other party's fault for some reason. The Commission for Military Oversight wanted to hang Sergeant First Class Granger on a cross in public to make her pay for the deaths of America's finest. Privately, she accepted a deal to take early retirement, a reduction in rank, and a homestead out west in exchange for never speaking of this again. She was right, but blowing the whistle gave the Army a black eye. It was about as fair as the Army ever got. General Finkster held a live-stream retirement ceremony commemorating 50 years of service. The President, along with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Speaker of the House, were present, singing the praises of a man who dedicated his life to the causes of freedom and American democracy. No one said much about his Alzheimer's that had been rapidly progressing over the previous 12 months. It would have been deemed inappropriate, given the General's legacy of service through 5 conflicts. Either way, we would be the 10th and final class to undertake the course. All the former students turned zombies were put down and given military funerals. Those that had rang the bell were quietly reinstated into rear echelon positions, as the Army needed every man it could get. The agricultural units were disbanded. Once word got out, they were practically slave labor camps. The Empire wasn't what it used to be, but some days it still did the right thing. Those of us who completed the course were given 30 days of leave and our choice of assignments. I picked a first responder teaching position in the Indianapolis colony. I was still assigned to my infantry battalion, but would report to Methodist Hospital every day. Maggie and I would get our own place downtown, with more than enough room for the baby. It was a bribe to keep my mouth shut, but I was going to take it. I had 10 years left till a pension, after all. I couldn't just throw that away. It was lunchtime, and we all sat in silence. The baked chicken crouched on my plate next to the overboiled peas and the half cup of mashed potatoes. I could almost hear them talking to each other, placing bets on how long it would take before I got eaten. "Well, I bet he makes it to day 3, said the chicken. "Nah, he's gonna quit today. He's scared," the mashed potatoes told the chicken, smirking like the rich kid volunteer at the poor summer camp. "He never got to go to summer camp," said the boiled peas. "He was too poor, and he's not going to quit either. Well, there's no way he's going to face Maggie and tell her they have to live on a work farm. He's going to keep going till he dies in pain," the boiled peas told the mashed potatoes. How was it the boiled peas knew the truth? "Well, either way, you're going to get eaten first," I yelled, stabbing the bland chicken with my fork, tearing it apart. I could hear the bland chicken screaming in pain. The mashed potatoes and peas followed soon after, each praying to their God for salvation that would never come. I was their God, choosing the time and manner of their death. It made me feel powerful and complete. You good, man?" the LT asked, sitting across from me. My food was taking bets on how long it would be before I got eaten by zombies," I said. "Yeah, well, we're just going to zip right past that. How did you score in the PT test this morning?" the LT asked. "I passed, but not by a lot," I said, feeling unenthusiastic about a mediocre PT score. "Same. I hit 80% in all categories, but that's not good enough. Especially if we want to make it out of here alive," the LT said, drinking his coffee. "2 more people rang the bell after the test," I said. "Only 51 left." Day 4. Number of students, 51. The evening walks were his idea. He was in civilian clothes and I was in PT's. The Atterbury Canal stretched out beyond us. The 3-mile loop, a common PT route for soldiers stationed there. The steps that we took over the canal were unnoticed by me as I was deep in thought. We had been talking for a half hour, and I was living out an experience that I had only seen a junior officer getting advice from an NCO. He'd pick my brain and ask me for advice, and I'd give a response that I hope didn't sound too much like a ramble. "How'd it go with Ramirez yesterday?" the LT asked. I nodded with a professional sense of pride, saying, "He wrote it and he turned it in. He got a perfect score. He showed it to me." "Yeah? What did it say?" "Well, he spent the first 5 pages ripping apart the scores. It was well written and had several good points." Staff Sergeant Allen is pushing it up the chain of command. "Did he find a young soldier to mentor?" the LT asked. "Yes, sir. Remember Rockwell from the test on day 1? He was eager to learn, and he kept wanting to ask me questions. And I told him I knew about as much as he did, and he should go to Ramirez for further guidance." "I've noticed Ramirez talking to the others here," the LT told me. "He's becoming popular." "With the students, yes. He's pretty open about his distaste for the course itself. And I honestly agree with everything he's saying thus far, sir." "What's he saying?" the LT asked, as we came up to the bridge that intersected the canal. "Oh, you know, sir, just how dumb this course is and how it's designed to weed out the weak ones." "And by weed out, you mean kill the weaker ones," the LT said. "Yeah. I don't want to be here either, sir." "Ramirez isn't a career soldier, so he gets to say whatever he wants, which I envy. But I can't. I have to keep Maggie in mind." "How is she doing?" he asked me as we approached the guardrail overlooking the river. "About as well as can be expected." I told her that most of this was simulated, and nothing was going to kill me, I said, looking down at my ratty running shoes. "And she believes you?" he asked. "Yep. Or at least Maggie made it sound like she did. She probably knows more than what she's letting on because, she's smarter than me and all. I think this is one of those things where if we both pretend it isn't happening, we won't freak each other out about it." "That sounds smart," the LT said, looking out over the water. The sun was setting on day 4, telling us that we were almost done. I could see the leaves floating down the river toward us, telling us how the summer was almost over, each leaf telling me how my time was fleeting, a piece of my life leaving me each day as I pushed through the pain in my knees. The trees arched over the river, giving each leaf shade. It all seemed to stretch into forever. "You know the ruck march is tomorrow," the LT said. "Yes, sir." "Then they'll probably send the zombies at us when we're about 3/4 of the way through." "Yes, sir. We should get some sleep. Got a big day of not getting eaten tomorrow."